Today, we have a special episode for part 2 of my integrative / functional medicine journey. I had the privilege of inviting in Melissa from Minneapolis Integrative, which is where I have been going to work on my health journey, and she agreed to be interviewed on the podcast. It was her first podcast interview. What I really took from this conversation is how complex the journey can be and how not unique it is to me. So I hope you enjoy today's episode. I hope it gives you insights into what it is like to work with a functional medicine doctor, and enjoy today's episode. Welcome to the Being Better Everyday podcast, where we make your days more peacefully productive while you're juggling all the things. I'm your host, Julie Wenslick, a millennial mom, finance professional, and founder of P&W Designs. I know that as a mom, business owner, corporate girly, or a combination of all three like myself, sometimes life can feel like a lot. With the simplicity in systems and being better every day, we create habits and routines that support your life, create calm in the chaos, and put the you back in your everyday. Grab those headphones, put on your shoes, and join me on a walk while we dig into today's episode. Welcome to the podcast, Melissa. I am so excited to have you here today. I was just telling her offline that I'm pumped because I feel like, originally I planned this podcast episode. It's part 2 of my functional medicine, integrative medicine journey, and I just planned on doing it on my own. But I had kind of made an offhanded comment to, was it your office manager, that I would love to have Melissa on the podcast, and she agreed. So today for part 2, I am not alone. So welcome. I actually don't know if I should call you doctor, so maybe clarify that too. But introduce yourself, your background, how long you've been with Minneapolis Integrative, all the things.
Well, thank you, Julie. Thank you for having me on. You're a very inspiring woman, and thanks for sharing your journey throughout this whole thing. I think so many people's symptoms have been normalized, and your journey has definitely been brings that to light. So I've been with Minneapolis Integrative Medicine Center for a year now, and before that, I have experience at Rejuve Medical doing more of a conventional / functional medicine with insurance based. So it's a little bit different, a little bit trickier to get all the labs covered.
So what is Minneapolis Integrative?
Oh, what is it? So Minneapolis Integrative Medicine Center is an integrative clinic. And the difference between integrative and functional medicine is that integrative is more of a blended approach. We use the same tools for conventional medicine and literature and research that that any conventional medicine route would go, but we look for the root cause. And functional medicine is looking for the root cause of the condition rather than masking symptoms with medication. So we use a blend of alternative medicine, a combination of therapies, a whole lifestyle, holistic approach to treat the whole body.
And I think that's why I've been so obsessed ever since I found you and I talked about it on my part 1 of the journey, which we'll certainly link in the podcast episode, but I spent years on the conventional medicine side of things. And even, I don't think I told you this when we met individually, but I did have it on one of my podcast episodes. I went for my annual checkup, whatever. I have anxiety meds, so I went for that in January and spoke to her about thyroid testing, because a year prior to coming to Minneapolis Integrative, I had done thyroid testing through my normal GP. And when she tested it, she tested the main TSH number and was just like, oh, it's normal. You just need to eat less and work out more. So I told her a year later, hey, I actually got the full panel. I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. Like, I have a bunch of other things going on. It's not just I need to eat less and work out more, because I felt very ignored. I'm gaining a bunch of weight. I don't know why. Well, after I told her that, and after we had the conversation about meds for anxiety, she ended the appointment with still, well, your BMI is still a little high. You really need to eat less and work out more. And I'm like, seriously? We just had a conversation about how I got diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, which is impacting my health. And you went right back to me not eating well, which, for those of you who follow me on social media and know me personally, I have a very, I watch my health. I obviously don't eat perfect. None of us do, but I eat whole foods. I target good nutrition. I work out regularly. Like I do all the things. So yeah, it's having that kind of, like you said, integrated approach has been something that I tell everyone about at this point because it's just been such a game changer after like what feels like 4 years of spinning my wheels.
You go for your, I went for my bachelor's of nursing degree, and I worked for about 8 or 9 years in the peds ICU along with pre-post-op surgery setting, and went back to school. So here I am.
Right? You have the training, you have, like you said, from a functional medicine perspective, some functional medicine people aren't licensed medical professionals, right? You are a licensed medical professional who happens to believe in functional medicine. And I think
Correct.
that's the difference there.
Correct. There are so many courses online that people can, like anyone can take. And chiropractors can take a functional medicine route. There can be just any person off the street taking a functional medicine route, and, nutritionists, and yeah, lots of different ways you can put a label on it. But yes, I went to school to get my medical license for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about the Minneapolis integrative approach. I mean, obviously I talked about it on part one, but I want to hear it from your perspective, right? How is it different than just going to a doctor and saying, I feel tired or I'm gaining weight, et cetera? Like, what does that process look like for people?
Yeah, in the first appointment, we get to spend 90 minutes together, and we go over in depth how you're feeling, what started that, when along your timeline, um, childhood. We go back as far as we need to go to figure out, along the way, have you had food poisoning? Did you start having symptoms when you moved into a new home? Kind of along the journey of not just why are you here and what can I give you to make that go away, and till I see you later and we can up your dose, but more of, okay, yes, you feel this way, but why? And so we do the initial intake. I can do a physical exam on the person, and then we plan for labs. So that might include blood testing or advanced testing where you do, urine or stool tests. But then we follow up after all of those labs come back and go in depth of why is this the way it is, and what is causing it, and how do we treat it.
So, from my experience, the first appointment, like you said, was like 2 hours, 1.5 hours. And I remember you asking things like, how many times have you been on antibiotics in the last couple of years? Because I have a toddler and inevitably you get what your toddler has. And so I had been on like 4 or 5 rounds of antibiotics in the last 4 years. Well, not even like three, maybe it was like 2 years. And prior to working with you and really diving into this side of healthcare, I didn't realize that that impacts your gut, right? So you were like, oh, you need to take a probiotic when you're on antibiotics. And I was like, why did no one tell me this? So even basic things like that's not why I was there, but it was something that now, even if my daughter gets sick and she's taking whatever the liquid thing is, um, that I'm like, oh, I need to give her an anti or a probiotic. If I'm not doing it regularly, at least while she's on antibiotics, because it kills both good and bad bacteria, right? Do I have that right?
Yeah, yeah. Some probiotics have antimicrobial effects as well. You are correct. And I think that is setting your daughter's life up for less problems down the road for sure. Like your microbiome is like your life. It's basically proves a lot of outcomes or influences so many outcomes in chronic disease. So it's the best thing
Yeah,
you can do.
it's insane. Like once you start seeing all these dots connect, you're like, it's all related, which is certainly how I would say the last 6 months have gone for me. So round one, we did the hour-and-a-half appointment. From
Mhm.
there, you're like, okay, let's test a myriad of things because my symptoms were general enough that we didn't exactly know why I was feeling tired and gaining weight and anxious and things that I just kind of attributed to motherhood. And then we got my first round of tests back, I would say end of September, early October, I think, off memory. From there, we came up with the treatment plan. So that again, I cover in episode one, but in general, I was diagnosed. Well, I don't know. Do you use the word diagnosed or do you not like labeling things? Are you okay with? Okay.
Yeah.
But generally, it came back with Hashimoto's, which I had never heard of, but apparently is decently popular, adrenal fatigue, low iron, massive, now worse hormone imbalances, which we'll get into. And then whatever you call like lack of absorption. What would you call that?
I call it hypochlorhydria, but
Mm,
basically low stomach acid, which
okay.
is, yeah, we can get into that too.
Okay. So, so from there, we started on kind of a supplement and actually, like you said, kind of a supplement combo and medicine journey because, again, the beauty of having you being a licensed practitioner is you can do both. You can target both. Talk to me a little bit about, when we look at just Hashimoto's, right? I'm going to pick one of them. General practitioner route, if you were not looking at the holistic way, right? Well, first of all, the test wouldn't even been run most of the time. Like I said, I tried to get the test run from the insurance route and it didn't work. They didn't run the full test. But since we ran the full test, talk to me about kind of like the difference in approach between the functional integrative medicine route versus kind of the traditional Western medicine route.
I think I can speak to that actually because I was a person who went through it. The conventional route, I have Hashimoto's as well. And when I first started, well, this is how I found functional integrated medicine was through my own journey. But I was just given a medication basically and told that I don't have to worry about it until things got worse. And they originally will run just a TSH, which is just the brain thyroid hormone rather than your actual T3, T4, which are the thyroid hormones. Your antibodies can get covered under insurance. So it's unfortunate that nobody would run that for you. My doctor actually did run them after my initial set of labs came back. And yeah, she just told me like, well, we've got this medication for you. And that's what basically all we can do about it. Really disappointed.
But yeah, learn something new. I did not know, obviously, because we're talking about me during our appointments, that you have Hashimoto's too.
Yeah.
So how long have you had it? And I would assume you're obviously in quote unquote remission.
I'm almost there. I was diagnosed almost 10 years ago and I was working overnight at the time in the peds ICU. I was a vegetarian, so I had high, carb
Mm.
diet, restricted my calories. I lacked protein. I over exercised. I was just so burnt out and so tired. So yeah, and then my doctor actually ran a food sensitivity test on me as well, which is not at all common. She was on a little bit more of the integrative side of things, and unfortunately has since retired. But she told me that my test came back positive for candida as well, and I had no idea what that meant, and didn't get treated for it. Lived with it for a long time. I've had a lot of food poisoning in the past, so I think I've had a lot of things that led to my Hashimoto's. But yeah, I was just in survival mode. So I quit working night shift and, tried to reduce stress. And I was like one of those people who overreacted. Any type of stress coming my way, I would like amplify that stress response, was not good. And yeah,
People
sugar
who
crash.
know me would be like, "Oh, that sounds like you."
Yeah, which
Fine.
adrenals, yeah, your adrenals were off whack. So it definitely plays a role in there too.
10 years is
Um,
a long time though. I'm like, oh boy.
Well, everyone has their own journey.
Yes.
I'm impressed with how I didn't have the guidance at all. And by the time I, took it upon myself to look into what I was trying to heal from, it was like 6 years later.
Yeah.
And
So it
uh,
doesn't count the first
it's,
6 years, right?
I
Like,
feel like it didn't because I had no idea. I was just basically wasn't making many changes. And I was basically told there was nothing I could do, absolutely nothing, which is devastating, to feel like you're not in control of your own health, which is very the opposite. You can actually go into remission from having Hashimoto's, and you may not ever have to take thyroid medication, which, I think is actually quite not common belief. I think most people think, oh, if I have Hashimoto's, I'll eventually just have to be on medication, and that's it for me.
yeah. And I think one of the reasons that I went the integrative route in the first place is from a family history perspective and growing up in northern Wisconsin, right? There was only the Western medicine, medicate, medicate, medicate. And I've seen what my mom has had to go through in that situation of she was diagnosed with one thing. Well, then they give her medication for that. And then that causes another symptom. So then they give her medication for that. And pretty soon it just kind of snowballs. And I've been in this journey of, well, I don't have the best health history. I don't have the best genetics. I'm going to do everything I can in order to hopefully have longevity and also feel amazing, right? For me, it was always around, I don't want to feel crappy. I guess is the way around it. The other thing that I find interesting, and this, if you have no anecdotal comments on this, that's totally fine. But I have, as I've talked about this in the last 6 months, come to realize that there's a lot of women with autoimmune diseases. And obviously there's a long list of autoimmune diseases. But what I'm finding is that a lot of them are diagnosed postpartum. And do you kind of notice that too? Is it something that, when I was listening to another podcast that was talking about it too, about the genetic, kind of your hormone changes, all of that sometimes will trigger autoimmune responses to things. And I truly believe that's what happened to me because not my first 9 months of postpartum, I was awesome. I felt great. I stopped nursing and everything shifted. And obviously your hormones change when you stop breastfeeding. So I truly believe, whether it was dormant for a long time before that or what, but like that's, I think, what triggered. And obviously, like you have a lot of stress postpartum. There's that too. But do you have you seen that too? Like, what's kind of your experience in that?
I have seen that, yes. And a lot of people, a lot of women will actually be diagnosed with thyroid disease during pregnancy. Your thyroid hormones are changing with the growing fetus. So it's definitely more common because of that. But yeah, it's, I would say, true that, many women will develop autoimmune disease after pregnancy. I do not know exactly why, whether it is like the stress of pregnancy, the changing hormones, but I can concur that yes, it is
Yeah,
way
the
more.
three I was having lunch with at work, and there was three of us, and all three of us, like it had happened postpartum. And again, some of them it took 8 years to on the journey of, diagnosis and trying to figure it out because they only want one route. And I think that's the thing that, it's an investment to go the integrative medicine route because like for me, this is all out of network, right? So I pay a ton for medical insurance through my company and basically I'm not using it, right? It's there as a knock on wood, Danny doesn't do this, but like falls and breaks her arm or whatever, right? It's there for like the big events. But at this point, my health journey is outside of insurance because it's going to be out of network and my deductible is so high that I'm not going to hit it with this process, which is good because that's a really high deductible. I don't want to spend that much money, but in general. And so it's definitely a privilege. I wish it wasn't, right? It was more accessible, but at the same time, it has lasting health impacts. So I think that's probably going to be an argument too, is you spend the money now so you don't have to spend the money later.
I agree. Yes.
Let's talk hormones because okay, my circle of people tend to be familiar with Dutch testing. And that is or is not how you test hormones. Is there another word for it?
Yeah, we have options to do Dutch test and serum testing or just blood labs. So sometimes people initially decide to do blood tests just because we're getting a lot of labs, and up front it can be nice to sort through like, well, are we dealing with thyroid? Are we dealing with adrenals or sex hormones or gut or all of the above, which is actually not uncommon. And then a person might decide like, oh, let's hone in on what area we might be dealing with, and then let's do a Dutch test. Or some people come in and want to do like all the advanced tests up front, and that's okay too. It's, yeah, sometimes you can tell, but just based off a person's symptoms, what we might be dealing
Mhm.
with, but a lot of things overlap, like the adrenals, symptoms wise, can overlap with hypothyroidism, which overlap with, estrogen dominance or lack of progesterone. So these all kind of overlap in a lot of ways and influence each other.
So
for sure.
explain to me, because I guess I just assumed what we were doing was Dutch testing, clearly not. So explain to me the difference between how we're testing versus Dutch testing.
Yeah, so we're doing blood tests. So either way, whether you do a Dutch test or blood tests, we want to do it in the mid-luteal phase. So second half of your cycle, about 5 to 7 days after you ovulate is that peak, when we expect progesterone and estrogen to be at their peak. And that's when we capture labs. So with the Dutch test, you'd be doing urine tests. And there are many different types of Dutch tests. You can actually do a urine cycle mapping Dutch test where you urinate all month long in send samples. It's dried urine. And then the Dutch test that we most commonly do is the one done on where you just do several urine samples over one day, and that will capture your adrenals as well. So it's going to be how, it would show you basically what we can find with blood tests, but it will show you more of your pathways. So, looking at blood testing, you can see where your cortisol levels start off in the morning. If you're already in a below optimal serum level, that just tells us that you are in the burnt out adrenal fatigue sort of state, because we expect your cortisol levels to be at their peak in the morning, like a half an hour after you wake up. So we can tell, based off of symptoms as well, if your cortisol is spiking right before bedtime, you have the wired and tired perhaps feeling, you might feel kind of like you're over caffeinated. So we could do, Dutch testing at any point, but for the first round and second round to update, we did blood testing.
I mean, there's so many things with regards to like what you said that I'm like, oh yeah, we should talk about this. So, first of all, one of the things I loved, and I thought, I mean, it was kind of defeating when we went through it the first time, but I'm used to it now, is the difference between ranges and optimal.
Mhm.
When I got my first round of testing, I feel like there was one thing outside of the actual range. And I was like, oh, I'm not that bad. And then you started to go through all of my numbers with regards to hormones and adrenal fatigue and my iron and my thyroid, and you're like, actually, there's a lot that's off. So explain ranges versus optimal, like how you walk through it with people, because it was very eye-opening to me having somebody who's really educated on that.
I think you explained it really well in your last podcast.
Okay.
I didn't make up the numbers. They're based off of, the optimal ranges are based off of a healthy person from studies. And then the standard reference ranges are almost expanded to meet the average American's health. So
So it's just
we
a numbers game of averages.
yeah, basically either looking at a healthy person versus looking at just the average American, which we know that, you
It's
know,
not healthy.
50% of the average American is metabolically
Yeah.
unstable. So, yeah.
As we went, okay, let's talk through phase one versus phase two, because I think going back to the hormones and adrenal, there was some interesting things that came out of it, right? So when we did round one, a couple of things that I did, which I can't remember if I talked about or not, so I'll just briefly mention, is I did do iron infusions. Budget-wise, I ended up doing 2 versus 3, but I did 2 iron infusions. I have been chronically low on iron since at least I was 16. I think one of the interesting things about that is when that's come up before, because obviously it comes up in my tests all the time, they're just like, oh, you might be a little tired. But what you explained to me is that, for example, even iron impacts your mood, which I was like, well, I would have addressed this a lot earlier if I would have known that it impacts my mood.
Iron is a precursor to serotonin and melatonin and dopamine. So it definitely affects mood, anxiety, sleep. Energy is just one of the things. But yeah, iron is a cofactor for so many things. And our thyroid needs it to function and to make proper hormones. So it's like one of the dominoes. If you stack up a bunch of dominoes in a row and then you knock them over, but you're missing 6 out of the 20 of them, you're not going to go anywhere. So it's definitely, you had a lot of deficiencies actually, which could also be the reflection of your lack of stomach acid, because if you don't have enough stomach acid, you don't absorb things as well. And if why do you have lack of stomach acid? That could have been, I think being in the adrenal like fight or flight phase for too long. You were in the adrenal fatigue
Well, and
numbers.
that's the thing, like as we talk about these, they're literally all related. And that's good and bad, right? When you're trying to address them, you're like, oh my God, this is exhausting. But okay, so iron infusions, we did supplements for some of the other things. We tried to address the whole stomach acid thing, although I have been pretty decent about taking supplements in the morning. Remembering to do apple cider vinegar, for example, not so fun. Less good about doing that. So that I'm not surprised those numbers round two did not move. My iron obviously did improve. My antibodies with my thyroid, when we measured round two, which is around 3 to 4 months later, were almost cut in half, right?
Yes. Mhm.
And so we did target that with an actual prescription, not a thyroid medication, an anti-inflammatory, and as well as I did some major diet changes. So
Mhm.
after, actually, like right before I got my results, because I saw it and then I Googled. But Dr. Google. I have been dairy-free and gluten-free basically since my results, my round one results. And that I think definitely helped as well, because like you've explained, gluten looks like thyroid or something. Just give me the like term of the whole gluten thyroid relation. How about that before we move on?
Yeah, it's called molecular mimicry. And this occurs because the protein structure of gluten and actually to a lesser extent dairy are similar to your own body's cells. So when your body, when you consume dairy or gluten, your body will see that and then attack the thyroid as a result. So it increases your antibodies.
I did some, again, major diet changes to help with that antibody number. The adrenal fatigue and hormone. So I was on the first round of tests, I was showing as having low progesterone, which gives the symptoms of estrogen dominance. And I expected that basically. I follow a living in the love I follow the Living in Sync podcast, which is actually one of my friends, but she talks about hormones and kind of symptoms and all of that. I was well aware of what estrogen dominance looks like, was pretty confident I had it. Didn't realize it was just because of a lack of progesterone. And then I also had what you kind of mentioned, low cortisol. So in the mornings when it's supposed to be high, it's low. And I'm experiencing kind of that flip at night. And I know why. And as I talk on this podcast, obviously it's my business, but I work a normal 9 to 5, quote unquote, right? And then I mom 5 to 6:30, 7, and then I plug into my business at night. So obviously that's not helping. I'm not giving it up yet, so we'll see how much progress we get on the adrenal fatigue. But one of the things we did to try to target it was raise my testosterone levels. Why do I need that, basically, right? As a woman, you're just like, I don't need testosterone, but apparently you do. Talk to me before we get into what we did. Explain kind of like the symptoms of adrenal fatigue and how it kind of all relates.
Yeah. Adrenal fatigue is basically your ability of your adrenal gland to make, you can still make the same amount of cortisol, but your body can't keep up with the demand that it's going through. So in conventional medicine, they think of the adrenals as a disease state where either you have, way too high or way too low, but there's this very much symptomatic gray zone in between. And it makes a person feel like they cannot wake up in the morning. They need coffee to get going. They might have an afternoon crash in energy, wired and tired feeling at night, weight gain, maybe more susceptible to illness, flus and colds, having difficulties dealing with stress, as we talked about that amplified stress response, low libido, lightheadedness, brain fog, poor memory, maybe waking up in the middle of the night or low quality of sleep, needing to snack all the time, craving salt, feeling, actually impacts your PMS. It can make you feel more moody, more fatigued, especially before your period comes along. It almost amplifies those symptoms. And dry skin, thinner skin, lower blood sugars, hair loss can affect your bowel movements. That's
Lots of
most of it.
things.
Depression, anxiety.
Well, and again, so we look at low iron, causes low serotonin or whatever, doesn't support it, which causes anxiety. Adrenal fatigue causes anxiety. Low progesterone has an impact on your anxiety, right? So I'm like, no wonder that
Yeah.
I've been struggling with anxiety over the last couple of years outside of the whole pandemic and raising a toddler. So we tried to target trying to raise one of my testosterone levels. And you've had a chart that shows me this at one point, and I was like, this is crazy. But basically, DHEA, which is what? A hormone?
It is a hormone, yes.
Okay. So DHEA can convert to testosterone. And so I was, for the 3 months, taking DHEA in order to hopefully convert to testosterone to assist in kind of that low testosterone level and again, this cortisol hormone or imbalances. Did I get that right?
So DHEA is a precursor to both cortisol and testosterone. And so it's called the cortisol steal, where cortisol will take up all of the DHEA and prioritize its own production and puts testosterone on the back burner. Where testosterone, think of it as this like longevity hormone. It's great for, libido and motivation and energy and fat burning and muscle building. So brain health, heart health, bone. So if your DHEA is getting used up to make your cortisol because of the demands of stress, it will put testosterone on the back burner. And it also influences, thyroid and puts progesterone on the back burner as well. But the hopes of starting DHEA was to boost up both of your cortisol and your testosterone levels.
I did that for 3 months. We took the test and we found basically no change in those levels over that 3 to 4 months. And then we saw my estrogen levels go up, what, almost 4 times in that 3 to 4 months, which going back to the conversation, I was already estrogen dominant. So I think the levels go up, not good. And so you explained this to me, but what can happen, and the reason you need to work with an educated integrative medicine person is this is all connected. And I actually did find out I have a friend who's taking DHEA to increase her estrogen levels. Again, it can sometimes go that way and sometimes not. But explain what happened with me in layman's-ish terms.
Yeah, yours went down the wrong pathway. So typically, DHEA will go down the testosterone cortisol pathway, but there's this enzyme called aromatase, and aromatase will convert DHEA into estrogen. And your estrogen levels definitely increased. And your progesterone did come up a tiny bit, but cortisol and testosterone didn't budge too much. So we had to block that pathway, the aromatase pathway. And so aromatase inhibitors are what we can do to stop that. And we stopped the DHEA as well.
Yeah, through this round 2 of testing, what I did is I obviously went in, did more blood work, got this similar, I mean, I don't think we ran everything, but same round of, tests of everything that was out of optimal range. And we saw massive improvements, right? We saw massive improvements in my antibodies. We saw decent improvements in my iron. I still have more to go, but instead of infusions, we're going to go back to like normal pill mode of that. Hormones became further imbalanced. And then the kind of cortisol remained flat, but obviously we know why because it went to the wrong pathway.
Mhm.
Did I miss anything on those kind of differences between the first round and second round? Oh, hold on. My
Okay.
cholesterol numbers improved, which I would say obviously partially diet related, right? I no longer eating gluten. I'm still eating gluten-free bread. Like I didn't completely remove carbs from my life, but no longer eating gluten, no longer eating dairy, and that obviously impacted the choices I made around the holidays, which helped. And then my A1C number. So we were also monitoring, I forgot to mention this, but we were also monitoring A1C is related to pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetes. And I have both type 1 and type 2 in my family history. So we were monitoring that, and that improved in the last 3 months as well. Really, I did not do the berberine route, which is a way to kind of help support some of that because it didn't agree with me. And so again, it was primarily like diet related, in my opinion. On the hormone route, after the phase 2 testing, what we have now decided to do is actually attack it from an actual hormone perspective. I know why, but explain why we want that route.
We want to lower your estrogen definitely because number one, that can make your cycles become irregular. It can make you gain more weight. It can make a person have more anxiety, depression. And so we want to block the aromatase pathway, and we also want to lower your estrogen or improve estrogen metabolism. And we metabolize estrogen three different ways. One is through the liver, one is through methylation, which is basically like B vitamins breaking down things in the body. And then another is through the gut.
And so I am now a couple of weeks. Like you don't take progesterone all the time. So I'm basically one round into progesterone. And I will say there's side effects, which I've been emailing Melissa about. But basically it is screwing up my cycle. It's something where as an individual, as a female, I have generally had a very regular cycle, but it's been very short. And so now one round of progesterone and my body's like, what are you doing to me? And I have found that any little tweak, my body freaks out because it's so used to operating under a certain way, right? So when I got the iron infusion, it messed up my cycle, which is what I think I got the stat. It was like 5% of people, it shortens their cycle. And I was one of the 5%. And now this is messing with it. There are some like downsides from the standpoint of like, oh, now I have to like play a guessing game, which don't love, but it definitely has. I'm looking forward to the benefits of being more balanced. And to me, the long-term vision is worth it. And, you know, did we mention kind of what it feels like to have low progesterone? I don't remember.
No,
Okay.
no, progesterone is your anti-anxiety, antidepressant, calming hormone. So that's one of the reasons a person would take progesterone at nighttime. But it can cause anxiety, depression, obviously irritability, mood swings, lack of sleep, inflammation, pain.
Yeah,
It
so
can
think
make
of
you
like PMS symptoms on steroids, right?
that.
Like,
Yes.
so I am looking forward to the benefits of it long term. It just will take some time. And that's why these journeys, right? It's not a one and done. It's we measure, we tweak, and then we kind of give it some time and then we redo it, right? And that's why it is definitely an investment. But for me, it's now like a lifelong journey. It may hopefully not be every 4 months, right? Hopefully I balance out. No, it's longer in between, but generally it's something that I plan on keeping up with forever because you just get so much more information about your body and what you need to be doing to support it, which then hopefully, right, gives you better benefits of less anxiety, less weight gain, less things. And the one thing I think about as somebody in my mid 30s is unfortunately, I'm dealing with hormone imbalances now in my mid 30s. I also know and am aware that I'm probably going to be dealing with hormone changes in the next 15 years until this is all over. So this isn't like a short-term journey, right? That's the downside. But I think the more informed you can be, the better. Um, because like you said, it's just small tweaks that make a big difference.
And it's not our goal at Minneapolis Integrative to, see people every 3, 4 months forever. Like our goal is to not have to see you and hopefully just check in when you feel like you want to check your hormones. Like that is ultimately what we want to do. We don't want to keep, having you come back over and over again. So I think that, we outline your goals definitely for that reason so that we can get you feeling great and not have you have to come back unless we're just checking in.
Obviously, as a, kind of step two, phase two, closing of me sharing publicly about my integrative medicine journey. I mean, for now, I'm back on a new route, which does require a lot of pills. I will say that. Like, I hate taking pills. And now I have to take probably 4 or 5 in the morning. And then I have like the digestive enzyme because I suck at taking apple cider vinegar. So I take that. And then I have a probiotic, which isn't related, but whatever, during the day, which I'm realizing I forget to take all of them today. So whoops. And then at night, I have the anti-inflammatory and sometimes the progesterone, right? So it's like, I don't know how many pills that is, but it's a lot of pills. So that's the one thing about this journey is like, you better be able to swallow pills because most of them are supplements, right? They're not, I don't know, medicine. We've talked about my journey. What else does Minneapolis Integrative kind of cover, research? Like, what other things do you treat? Like all that kind of stuff.
We treat mostly everything. So we have specialized providers. One specializes in our nurse practitioner, Hannah, specializes in peds. She does do adults as well. Hormones, gut, adrenals, you name it. We have Dr. Crystalline, who, has her own specialties. She deals with very complicated cases and a lot of mold, Lyme, you name it, autoimmunity. And then Dr. Kiana does cancer, actually. She helps people get into remission or if they've had a history of cancer. So that's her specialty. So we have, and then of course we treat gut, and Dr. Cassie's our founder. She does see some patients as well. But yeah, we treat anywhere from gut, thyroid, adrenals, weight loss, weight gain, having autoimmune diseases, chronic pain, you
Yeah, I
name
think
it.
about the people I know that have, even chronic pain conditions and they're only on the Western medicine route. And I'm like, sometimes I want to be like, just pay, save the money and put this as a priority because you will not be sorry, right? One thing I should mention is Minneapolis Integrative is only in Minnesota because obviously as licensed professionals, there are licenses required. And everything we talked about today, not medical advice, but just again, I have people in Wisconsin that I'm like, you need this. And I'm like, but unfortunately, you can't be in, you're not in
I
Minnesota.
actually I actually have my Wisconsin license, so I do see virtually people in Wisconsin.
Oh, you just made my day. Good to
I have
know.
an yeah.
For those who are in the Twin Cities, because I have a number of listeners in the Twin Cities, they are opening in Wayzata this spring. Do you guys have an open date?
April.
Yay. I'm
I believe it's
excited because they were downtown and now this is going to be a lot closer to me. So, like, second round, right? We did only virtually because I'm like, I'm not going downtown. So, it'll be nice to go in person. And their new office is, from what I've seen kind of on Instagram, like gorgeous. So, one of the other questions that I've struggled with is, let's say you're not in Minnesota, right? Or you're not in where you're licensed. How do people find a resource for functional medicine?
So there are databases that can help you find a naturopath versus a chiropractor. There's the IFM that has certified only providers on there, which could include, any type of professional. So there are ways to look it up.
So let's say IFM, which stands for Institute of Functional Medicine. It's ifm.org. There,
Okay.
if I quick looked up, Mound, which is where I'm located, it said there are 52 people licensed as a functional medicine person within 150 miles of Minnesota. And there are some with letters after their name and some without. So for those who are maybe like trying to figure out what's the right path for them, what does ND stand for?
Naturopathic doctor,
Okay. What does DC stand for?
doctor of chiropractics,
Okay, that makes sense. DNP, I think, is what you
doctor
are?
of practitioner.
Okay, so that is what you are, a nurse, a doctorate of nurse practitioner. Except for I think you're an advanced, right? Um,
Um, Both are advanced. So I have my
okay.
master's, there's doctorate, there's and then you take the same certification
Okay.
for licensure.
And then RN would be like an RN registered nurse. MD is medical doctor.
Yep.
What
I
about
don't
DO?
DO is another doctor.
Okay. So there are, I mean, again, just scrolling, there's 52 people in my area, and most of them have some sort of medical license as well, as not, outside of functional medicine, naturopathy. But obviously you're gonna have to like Google what their letters mean because like some of these have four different letters after their name, and it's going to be whether it's a certificate or whether it's like you said like a nurse practitioner or a doctor or a chiropractor, right? So kind of just do your research, and then obviously if you have, I feel like a lot of people in their 30s, like this millennial generation, are more open to being like the holistic medicine. So ask your friends. That's another way of kind of figuring out what's the right path for you. And for me, I did try the pure functional medicine route first. I talked about that on my first podcast and found it wasn't in depth enough. And it didn't give me the path that I have now. And so having that kind of married of the two and really just a partnership has been much more beneficial. So anything else you want to cover? Any last words? Otherwise, we'll just kind of point people to how to find Minneapolis Integrative.
No, I think that's great.
If you want to follow them on Instagram, I'll link it, but it's Minneapolis MPLS Integrative MC on Instagram. And then mplsimc.com is the website. Again, we'll link both of them. But it's been something that I'm super thankful for. And again, it's been nice to talk to you and have your time today and kind of help me share my journey so that other people don't feel so alone. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Julie. I really had fun.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Being Better Everyday podcast. To see any visuals, head over to my YouTube channel. Links, socials, and resources mentioned can always be found in today's show notes. I truly appreciate you leaving a rating and review to help me reach more women looking to build systems to be peacefully productive. If you are looking for more, you can always find me on Instagram at julie.pwdesigns, sharing the behind the scenes of my everyday life as a millennial mom, corporate girly, and small business owner. Until next time, keep on taking one step at a time towards your version of being better every day.